Fam, we have a powerhouse of a guest for you today. You will be blown away by the information that she has to offer us. So today we have Dr. Rosalee Brown. She is a consultant dietitian, a behavioral health consultant, an integrative health and lifestyle practitioner, and a certified diabetes educator. You see how much knowledge this lady has power packed inside of her? So we are excited to have Dr. Rosalee Brown here with us just to talk to us about food, something we all love, and health, and what that means and how we're going to go about making healthy choices moving forward. We don't want to keep this information from you any longer, so let's get into it. So welcome, Dr. Rosalee Brown. It's such a pleasure to have you here today. We do appreciate you lending us a little bit of your valuable time. And we just want to get started, as we usually do with all our guests, just to find out a little bit about who you are, and in particular for you today, why dietetics and health? Can you talk to our viewers about that?
Okay, thank you very much, Tam, for having me, and also Shan. And it's really a pleasure. I was going through your channel last night and I realized that I'm among very esteemed guests. So it's really a pleasure. A little bit about me. I am a health passionista, if we can coin that word. I'm really passionate about health. And the older I become and see the impact health has on individuals, on cultures, on generation, and on mankind, I am more focused to get that word across. In terms of dietetics, I happened into dietetics. I've always been interested in health, but dietetics was not one of those choices. I happened into it when I went into university, and I've fallen in love, and it has been my passion since. I have widened it to include other areas, but food is core to who we are. It fuels our lives, and so I'm proud to be a dietitian.
Awesome. That's awesome. And Shannon and I can speak for the both of us. We love food. So
yes,
especially cultural food.
Yes, especially the cultural food. So we are so excited to be talking to you about this entire topic. I wanted to start with, something that we, again, Shannon and I both identify with very closely, the fact that we are very busy moms, full-time working people, and we have a family to take care of as well. And food is very important, and we struggle. I know I personally struggle with sometimes finding that balance between work, home, and providing that value and health in terms of the meals that we provide and prepare. So yes. I wanted you to just give us a little bit of advice to us and to the other families out there about that area. What would you recommend in terms of us finding that balance and really providing some nutritional, valuable meals to our families?
Okay, thanks for that question. My recommendation comes from my experience as a mother. I have 2 grown children and a granddaughter, and also from providing some tips on a daily basis to persons, and from a more academic point of view, writing about this topic. So I know it is very, very difficult to make a decision how to feed children, especially children nowadays who are exposed to the internet. They know what is available. Children who are bombarded with advertisement. It is very difficult. But what I will say to mothers and fathers and families, caregivers, that you start first with your value system. So you have to make a decision. What is important? What is important to you as a family? Who do you want your children to become? Who do you want the next generation to become? Because the food they have now is going to determine the sort of grandchildren you're going to have and great grandchildren. So when you make this decision, it makes it a little easier, not very easy. The next thing I would ask you to do, if you have children who can understand, and nowadays from they're 2 years old, they can be part of a conversation. Bring them into that conversation and let them understand how important food is, yes, for taste and for giving them the things they love, but also how it is going to help them to be the sort of human beings they want to become. And I'm sure they always talk about that. And when you have made that decision, you have to be now intentional about how you're going to achieve that with your family. And you have to stick to your guns. So the choices you make should not only be affected by what is advertised, because it will be affected, but you have to make sure it is that choice which will engender the value system that you have. Is it going to be the health of your children? Do you want to prevent some of the chronic diseases? Do you want them to learn about your culture? Do you want them to learn new tastes? So all of these decisions will go into that. And you want to make sure it's healthy. So it can be difficult, but I think you need to start with that conversation first, because many persons just go along and busy. I see persons going to the supermarket and allowing the children to fill the trolleys with whatever they want. That can save you from the tantrums and all of that that we see sometimes displayed, but it's not going to save you from the long-term problems. So you have to sit down, have that conversation, let them know what is important, and also sometimes give them a little slack. So have some compromise when you shop and give them a choice, but predominantly make that decision around your value system. Is it health? Is it the prevention of chronic diseases? Is it tied in with economics? All of that, bring them into that conversation and say, these are the things mommy will have to buy. And also let them join in the preparation. So when they're part of it, I think it's a little easier. It's not going to solve the problem, but it can be easier. So this is where I usually start with parents who are having these battles, and they do have the battles.
I have actually never thought of that. That it does begin with that value system. This is really eye-opening for me, you just even stating that out loud. And to some extent, I feel like I've inadvertently been doing that a little bit, but not consciously.
Yes.
So it really does bring forward something for me right now that I'm going to make a determined effort to maintain, and definitely to have that conversation. You know, about, you're right, money is a part of the conversation, because we often find too that the things that are not always the healthiest can sometimes be the cheapest, you know, in some instances. And the fast food, it's just there. So I'm really enlightened by that point that you just made, those points and that discussion there.
And it's very difficult for these children because they're targeted.
Yes.
These food industry, big food as it is called, they spend billions of dollars targeting the children at the right time, the right portions, the right color. So don't feel bad. They make it hard for us, not just for you as parents, but for health practitioners, for everybody, because it's a big business. So it's very difficult to get them to sway to where you want them to. But when you start early and it becomes a part of the family, it becomes the norm, it makes it a little easier.
Yes, yeah, I agree. One of the things you mentioned just now was about the cultural impact too, right? In terms of, do you want your kids to be, associated with your culture. And food is a very important part of that for us as Jamaicans, as Caribbean people all around. Everything revolves around food.
Yes.
And we have some really rich foods.
Yes.
And we prepare them in very rich and tasty ways. And
we're known for foods.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. So one of the questions I have for you is that, as we get older, we tend to get caught up with a lot of the fads and the whatever information is thrown out there about the new things and what's best for you and how to diet and these different kind of diets. And I personally sort of almost feel guilty sometimes when I want to indulge in my typical Jamaican stuff because,
Right.
I feel like maybe it's not the healthiest. And so I wanted you to talk to us a little bit about that. How do we even find that balance and to maintain our culture and or even to prepare the cultural foods in new ways. What could you tell us about that?
All right. So first, I want to say, do not feel guilty.
Thank
Our
you.
foods are great. They're healthy. They're tasty. Persons come to the Caribbean for our foods. But culture is so different all over the world. And many of the foods which are now being promoted as being healthy, they are part of the cultural makeup of another group of persons. So maybe one of the things we need to do is to promote our food some more and promote the health benefits of our food some more, so they can be out there with the other foods, the quinoa and the other foods. So they are just as known. But a little bit about foods in general. They did not just start a few years ago. They go back to hundreds of years ago. And they are associated with what used to happen to the people in those years. So for us in the Caribbean, our history is tied to slavery.
Right.
And so a lot of our foods in those early years, to preserve them, they were salted or they were dried. And we have become so accustomed to these foods because we're excellent cooks. So it has become a part of our DNA, the corn pork, the Ackee salt fish, the escovitch fish, the use of a whole lot of seasonings. This is what we are used to. But we also are aware that we also have some of the lifestyle diseases, which we can speak about a little later on. So as we become more aware, we want to now continue to enjoy our foods because in their natural states, or fresh vegetables or ground provisions or starchy fruits or breadfruits or green bananas, they are excellent. But when we prepare them, we modify that goodness. So it's the things we add to these foods which can increase their risk of being unhealthy. So what I would say to you, Shan and Tam, as you try to maintain your culture, as you try to introduce these foods to your children who are now living in another country, and to get them to transfer these tastes to their children, you can start modifying the preparation at home without altering them too much. So for example, you're doing an Ackee and saltfish, you can use more fresh herbs in the preparation instead of some of the powdered seasonings. You could use less of the salted fish, make sure it's properly desalted as much as possible. You could use something else instead of the saltfish. You're making your rice and peas on a Sunday. Our parents used to use a whole coconut or even more. So you could use a little less of that, more fresh herbs. So the tradition is still there, but the foods are a little healthier. The portion sizes could also be altered. So now when you start to cook them in these healthier ways, Your children are going to learn your healthy ways. They're not going to know about how your grandmother used to cook it. You have that information. You have modified the recipes. They still taste good. So your children now know how their mother, which is you, the next generation, is preparing it in a healthy way. They pass that on to their children. So the fried dumplings are passed on, the green bananas are passed on. But how they used to cook it, they would put some oil in the pot or a piece of meat or so on. You can start making those modifications so they're healthy. So we can still embrace our foods. Our foods are healthy. Our foods are delicious, but we make the modification and we should not be ashamed of them. So this is what I would say. Continue to have our greens, continue to have our fruits. A part of it too has to do with trade. So a lot of our foods will be marketed as being unhealthy because there is a similar product which wants to take over the market. So we need to do our research and know that our foods are healthy while we don't go overboard in the consumption. We should not be ashamed of eating them. We should allow our children to taste them, and so they can pass it on to their children when we're not there. And one way to do that is to keep it as part of your memories. So whether you're going to do it once a week or on special occasion, but do not eliminate it from the diet. I've seen too many Caribbean persons with children who are born in the first world and they're not exposed to the culture. It's a shame. But when you look at other cultures, they still embrace their foods. And one way of eradicating a culture is to eradicate the cultural norms or foods or recipes. So we have to fight for that. Our foods are healthy. We just want to modify the preparation. A little less sugar here, a little less salt, less of the powdered seasoning, more of the fresh herbs. Teach the children. It's new to them. So teach them to appreciate these new tastes, which might be a little different from how you had it. But then you teach them to appreciate that less fat and that less salt. They won't know the difference and they learn to enjoy it and it's healthier for them. So that is what I would recommend. Portion size, methods of cooking, but we have the best foods on the planet.
And and it's interesting you say that because our food is a part of us, right?
Yes,
it's a part of our culture. And I like the fact that you said you don't have to eliminate. It's just shifting the mindset, how you prepare the food. You may not have to use all that oil and all that salt, but incorporating more healthy stuff while still maintaining that tradition. I like that. And I just wanted to tap into something that you said as well, Dr. Brown, earlier about diseases, particularly within our Black culture. I know there's so many healing foods out there for diseases specifically, such as hypertension, diabetes, different things. Can you speak to us about some of the healing foods that are prevalent within our community, specifically for these diseases?
Right. So as I said before, foods are very good. So we have the healing foods right in our culture. We just need to embrace them some more. But just a little bit about the diabetes and the high blood pressure, if you don't mind, for persons who want a little bit more about that. So a lot of us are born with what we call a predisposition. There is a small genetic predisposition. So it depends on our mother's history, what was happening with our mothers when she was pregnant. But even though we have that predisposition, it is like the bomb, but our environment, our lifestyle is that match which strikes that bomb. So this is where the food comes in. So what diabetes, for example, is our body's inability to use up the energy we get from food because it's not functioning very well. So we now need to look at having more foods which are not so processed. Remember, we spoke earlier about the food environment. So because most of us are very busy, we're rushing there, rushing here. Foods have to be prepared, which are convenient, that we just put it in the microwave, opening it and put it in the pot, it cooks in 1 minute, or eat it straight from the packet. In order for them to do that, they have to take it through different processing. Because if you take out a green banana and you put it on the counter, very soon it will be ripened and then it will spoil. But if you use that same green banana and make it into banana flour, it can last for 50 years. But is it the best thing for you? Because what has happened with that banana flour, the fluid is taken out, the fiber, which is the rough edge, is taken out, and most of the nutrients that allows it to stay longer on the shelf. And we could look at wheat. The same thing happens with the wheat. The nearest we can think of unprocessed wheat is like our bulgur. You see how plump it is and brown? By the time they're done with the processing, it is white and like talcum powder. So when we consume those foods, we're getting a lot more, but in smaller contents. And our stomach has something we call like a stretch nutrient, which tells our brains when we're full. When we're eating those processed foods, we tend to eat more before we get to that volume where the stretch signal goes off. And the more you eat, you put on weight, you store energy that we're not using. And that increases our risk of the diabetes, also the high blood pressure, because of what is stored in the food. To process that flour, to process any food you take up in a packet, your bread, your crackers, they have to use sodium in the processing. So when you're finished, look at your labels. So it's either sodium bicarbonate, sodium nitrate, sodium something another. And that sodium increases our risk for high blood pressure. So how are we going to use our foods to do that, to reduce our risk? We now have to strive to eat more whole unprocessed foods. It can be a little difficult because what it means, you can't just rush home from work now and put it in the microwave or eat it from a packet. It's going to need more processing. So the more we can get more of our whole foods into our diet, it's better for us. So for example, 3 fingers of boiled banana is a better choice than 3 slices of processed bread. And we could look at all the choices. A large salad with some beans is a good choice. That is better than bread again, or whole grains. So you're living in a first world country, you don't have the farm at the back of the yard. You have to know when you go to shop, look for those foods which are not as processed. So when you consume more unprocessed foods and you have more of your vegetables and beans on the plate. So one very good rule of thumb, which a lot of persons are using now, is to make half of the plate your vegetables and fruits. So those tend to be not unprocessed, and make 25% of the plate your staple foods, the starchy foods, and another 25% your meat or fish or beans. So to reverse the diabetes, Shan and Tam, or to manage it, we need to go for more whole unprocessed foods, smaller amounts of these foods. And it's not just foods. We have to look at our whole lifestyle. So how do we move? What is our environment like? Our activities? Are we sleeping? So all of these things are going to go together, because when we're sad, we medicate with food. So even healthy food, when we consume too much, it becomes a problem. If we eat too many ripe bananas or too many apples, which are healthy, we are going to gain weight, which increases our risk for diabetes and high blood pressure, and the #1 killer in first world country, heart attack. So yes, it's good for us to have these healing foods, but we need to watch our amounts. We need to be active. We need to play more activity. We need to sleep more. So it's a balanced life, and food is a part of that balanced life. So yes, let's eat more of our callaloo or green bananas or breadfruit when we can get them. But you also have to eat some of the other cultures' food, because it might be on the supermarket shelves. So you go for the whole ones, the ones which are not so processed. And the rule of thumb, even when it's healthy, you make half of the plate your vegetables, your fruits. third or 25% of the plate, your starchy foods, and another 25%, your meats or fish or beans, and drink a whole lot of water.
Okay.
So it's not easy, but you can get help. There's a lot of credible information on the internet, which can help you. You can also speak to other persons who are doing this and they are having a success of it. So our foods are healing. Our foods can help to reverse diabetes and high blood pressure or manage them very quickly if we're wise in how we use it.
How we do it.
Well, Dr. Brown, you know, food is life, but as you said, balance, shift in mindset, and I know that the viewers are eager to hear what else you have for us. Shantam fam, I know that you were just as enthused as Tam and I to listen to Dr. Brown and the wealth of information that she's sharing with us. Be sure to come back next week for our part 2 of our discussion about food, healthy lifestyle, and balance.
And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, people.
Yes.
Share it, share the video. Yeah, like share it like you'd share the food we're talking about. And we'll see you again next week.
Bye for now.